yeah, there's one other thing that I wanted to mention about the shale. You know, is there going to be gas or oil or natural gas liquids? Excuse me. Natural gas liquids could be propane, butane, or ethane. And it's interesting, when we look at the shale over in the eastern United States, the Utica Shale, in the eastern United States, the far east part is very deep and very thick, and it's what's called over-mature. As it moves further west, it gets shallower and thinner, and then there's been less pressure on it. Where it's so deep and thick, there's been so much pressure on it, all the oil and gas is gone. But as it gets shallower and thinner, it becomes less mature, and there's still dry gas there. As it becomes shallow and thinner, over into western Pennsylvania, maybe West Virginia, over in eastern Ohio, it has natural gas liquids in it. Then as it gets shallow and thinner over into Ohio, they believe there's oil. And then as it gets shallow and thinner, then it's immature. So, you know, whether there's oil or gas here, it's going to depend on how long, how much pressure's been on there, how thick it is, how deep it is. What's the potential? There's a well over in eastern Ohio called the Buell Well. Back in September, Chesapeake Energy reported, and I'm going to preface this here in a minute, there was 9.5 million cubic feet of gas potential production there a day. 1,425 barrels of natural gas liquids would be like the propane, butane, and ethane, or 3,010 barrels of oil. Now after that, they were soliciting investors to come in and help buy into them, so you need to preface some of that. Anadarko is a large company. They've reported some promising wells in Ohio. One well produced 9,500 barrels in 20 days. So you do the math, that's about 550 barrels a day or something like that, or a little bit, 450 barrels a day, something like that. I mean, all the major companies over in Ohio are there, some of the world's largest one. Hess paid over $7,200 in September to buy leases. Chesapeake sold 25% of share of Ohio Utica oil field. They sold it to Total SA of France. Conic, which is or Sinopec, which is a company in China, has about 25% share in some of the companies here. So they have taken some minority interest. I don't believe they can take any more interest than that in some of the companies. Where's it at here in Ohio? If you look at the line over on this side, that's where the Utica potential has kind of been at in Ohio. Clif and I live. Clif lives over in this region here. I live over here. There's more potential right now in Clif's neck of the woods than for me, but you know, you just kind of wait and see what happens. What's the potential here in Illinois? You can see the green shaded area here is where they perceive a lot of the potential at, so there's definitely some potential here in Illinois as well. What is the production process like? You know, the selection preparation process, it may take 4 to 6 weeks. Drilling the well. When they start drilling, it's going to go on 24/7. Now, there's been situations like when they were drilling in downtown Austin at the University of Texas where they would not drill at night, but by and large, they're going to be drilling 24/7. They're going to have to complete the well, include the hydraulic fracturing. They're going to need to market the resource, and that's going to mean putting in lines. And folks, that's going to cause some issues. It's going to cause some issues. If you have a well on your property and they need to move the line, move the product over line, and your neighbors don't want to have the lines, that can create some issues. Then ultimately reclaiming the site. I mentioned how large the site is. This is interesting here. The pads in our area are about 2 feet of stone plus geotextile cloth. So do the math. 4 to 8 acre size pad, 2 feet thick of stone. How much stone is going to need to be hauled in? Now that'd make a great feedlot when it's done, wouldn't it? Impoundments, you may include freshwater holding lakes. It depends where they get the sources of water at. Some companies are actually using tanks now versus the water holding lakes. They're using most companies now are using a closed loop system, and I'll explain that more to you in a minute, what's going on there. How do they pick the site? First of all, they're going to look for favorable geology. There's no question about that. Topography, it's not as much of an issue here in Illinois as it is in Ohio. We have some really rough ground. Access roads, the first wells they're putting in our area is right along state highways. Because the companies don't have to, in Ohio, they do not have to reimburse the state for any damage. They have to reimburse counties and townships for damage. And then how close are schools and homes? They try to keep them away from there as much as possible. This is what the old rigs look like. These are the rigs that I saw that I've seen in Ohio for years, drilling some of these shallower wells. You've seen a lot of these. The cars pull right up to them, you know, not making much of a footprint. Here's what the new ones look like. It's a lot bigger, isn't it? These drilling rigs can be as high as 150 feet tall. This one over here you're looking at is called a triple rig. This triple rig has the ability to hold 3 30-foot sections of pipe, so about 90 feet total of pipe. So it can do an awful lot. You can see all the trailers along the sides there. It takes a pretty big area there during the drilling process. There's a side view of it. You can see some of the things they have to kind of keep erosion down and getting things reseeded there. This was taken back in February up in north central Ohio. There's another rig going on there. Portage County, this is up to between the Cleveland and Youngstown area. This is one near where Clif lives over in Guernsey County. That's east central Ohio. This trailer right here in the middle is what's referred to as the Doghouse. That's where the operation center is going on, where they're actually monitoring the drilling. And it's really interesting when you're in there. This drilling's a lot different than what it used to be. It used to be they would drill down so far and think they've hit a good sweet spot. Then they go in and hydraulically fracture and hope it'd start producing. They now have GPS on these drill bits. And they can drill down and they can put these directional bits on and take about 500 feet to go horizontal. People ask, how do you go from vertical to horizontal? If you have a 500 feet section of pipe, it can bend. Okay, so it bends, and then they have that GPS on them. They can literally hit a can of pop at 10,000 feet away. They can actually go, when they start going horizontal, you know, a lot of this shale isn't straight and flat. It may be more like waves and kind of move around, so they can actually go with the shale and kind of follow and monitor exactly where they're going. And I asked them people, I said, what's your success rate at drilling wells? They said 98%. So when they're drilling wells there, this was people that I talked with at Chesapeake, when they're drilling wells, they think they're going to hit. This is one over in Medina County, just another well there. Now, what's it going to look like when they're done? This is the first well in production, the first Utica shale well in Ohio. That's what it looks like when it's done. That's the well right there. Now, if you think about it, if they're going to put 4 to 8 wells on that pad, they're going to have that one there that you look at, and they may go as close as just 15 feet away, and that's where they're going to drill the second well. And they may go another 15 feet and drill the third well. They tend to drill them a lot like the end of a pitchfork. They'll start here, they'll go down, and then spread out, kind of like the way a pitchfork would go. If that's on a 640-acre unit, it may go that way. Then if it's a 1,280-acre unit, they may take 4 and go back the other direction. So that's kind of the tendency of how we're seeing them drill in Ohio. And they're also drilling in a north-northwest to a south-southeast pattern so they can intersect the cracks better. So when you look at just taking out like a 640-acre block or a section of land on your farm, they may not actually use that as a unit. It's going to depend which way some of the cracks are going down in the shale. At least that's what they're doing in Ohio. Now, the old wells here in southeast Ohio, they would have 1 or 2, maybe 100-barrel tanks. This is what they have on these new wells. There are 6 400-barrel tanks there at that site. And some of them may be producing so much that they may have to put lines and have more of a different type of collection site for it. But that's what the potential looks like. Large gas lines will need to be installed. So these are going to be large ones. And you need to make sure on your lease that any lines, except for the lines going off your well, are separate negotiations, just like disposal wells or anything else, separate negotiation. They tried on my farm, because there was an old well on my farm, they tried to claim that in that lease that they had the right to lay any line that they wanted to across the farm, and I had to get an attorney. They tried to say there was an ebb and flow clause in there. Well, I had to get an attorney, and I got them stopped. There's the new gas line installed, and just for the record, I would not want to have my house that close to a high-pressure line. There was a line in our county that exploded last year, transmission line, and blew up a couple houses. How about roads? Our engineer in our county is a little bit encouraged. They've worked with the other engineers. They're the ones that are in charge of the county roads in our county, and he was concerned about it at first, but they have set up new agreements with these companies that before they come in, his concern at first is do they fix the roads as they go, or do they get them built up to an acceptable stage before they come in? And they need to get them up to an acceptable stage before they come in, because if I'm a homeowner that doesn't have that I don't have anything to do to be involved with this, I'm just a good factory worker, and suddenly I can't get out the road that day because it's in such bad shape and I lose my job, that's an issue. Our engineer's concerned about it, and rightfully so. The companies that we see are taking these roads and really building them up. I live down in southeastern Ohio in the Appalachian foothills. I doubt if I've got 4 inches of base on my road. In the spring thaw, I've gotten stuck in the road before, so it can get nasty. In this situation here, at the picture you're looking at, they've added 18 inches of base to the road, and where I saw them here a month ago working on some wells, they were creating a lot of dust. They had water trucks down spraying the roads trying to keep the dust down, but they've added a lot of base. Our engineer, if they get 18 inches of base on that road, they're going to be good for years to come. So they do have a pretty good reputation of taking care of the roads. Now, during the production process, when they're coming and doing that, there's going to be a lot of traffic on there. We were out at Greene County, Pennsylvania last June looking at some sites. We took some county officials out. Tom Murphy from Penn State University, he's been involved with this, took us out to some sites, showed us a drilling rig and a fracking operation going on. But there's a site we were at here. They were, again, they are taking us around, so they wanted to show us everything right they were doing. But they were talking about some best management practices they were using that go above and beyond regulations, trying to keep the problems down. And let's face it, they're going to probably try to do the best job they can. They do not want to be approached by the media with any types of issues, and they've had a few. There's the backside of the drilling rig where they've separated the fluid from the drilled materials. A lot of the fluids recycled, the drilled materials, some of them went to landfills where they were used as covers, and things were planted there. There's a containment wall around the whole site. It's about 3 feet tall all the way around the site. A lot of them have walls around them as a sound barrier. All of them I've seen during the process have a guardhouse to try to monitor things. So there's a lot going on. This is looking right outside the Doghouse. Where I live out in southeast Ohio, we do not have cell phone service. And if this does happen there, the whole county will have cell phone service because they'll probably put in the towers themselves just to make sure they have direct contact with their base of operations wherever it's at. This is what the shale looks like, and I'm sorry it doesn't look better, but the cracks are going vertically here in this piece of shale that was taken out during the horizontal process. All the oil and gas is kind of locked in those cracks, and that's why they're going horizontally to intersect those cracks. We went out to a hydraulic fracturing site there in western Pennsylvania just to show you what was going on. Here's where they were mixing sand with fresh water. Then they were adding the chemicals, anywhere from 0.5% to 2% of the fluid. In that one slide I showed you, they were using about 1% of the fluid there. Here's an interesting one. This line on the left is where they were running out the fresh water for the hydraulic fracturing process. This line here is all the recycled material. Roughly 10 to 20% is flowback that comes out right away after the hydraulic fracturing process. Some more of the product is going to end up coming out once production starts. But about 10 to 20% is some of that flowback that comes back with that initial burst of fluid after they apply all of that pressure. And then here they're using high pressure to frac the well. Could you see where there could be some surface issues? Look at all the metal that's being used and stuff. And I saw on these, and I asked them about that. I said, what are these white bands around here? I asked them about that. Every piece of metal is pressure checked every 6 months. And it's not used over 85 to 90% of its rated pressure. So they're constantly checking that to help assure or reduce any chances of any type of breakage on the surface. Here is the head of the well. The wellhead's down here towards the bottom. And then the Christmas tree is up at the top where there's 3 blow-off preventers. Again, if one goes down, they try to have a couple backups for that situation. If you look at the bottom there, that's the perf pipe here before they actually set off the charges. And they'll kind of blow through those holes, and that's what it looks like when it's done. So they'll pull that casing back out or that line back out, and then they'll go in with the high pressure to extend those cracks out. But those cracks are kind of elliptical. The cracks tend to go more out horizontally, less up vertically. So it's a little bit like this is how it tends to happen. They tend to want to send the fractures out more horizontally. And then here we were driving around and we could see some large transmission lines going in throughout southwestern Pennsylvania and the tip of West Virginia. Here they were drilling boring underneath a river production line. And then we actually stopped at a compression station. There was a compression station there. Clif's going to talk a little bit later on. When you sign a lease, so many people talk about how much the royalties are going to be. Clif's going to talk about the point that not only what your percentage of royalties is important, but whether you're getting paid on the gross or the net. Because when you look at those compression stations there, that gas is being run by somebody that's getting paid on the net. If I'm getting paid on the gross, I'm not paying for those generators to run, am I? But if you're getting paid on the net, it's your gas that paid for that generator to run. Think about that. What are some recent trends, folks? There's so much stuff going on right now. It just blows me away. Natural gas use, it had dropped down to around $2 a couple months ago. They actually projected that by mid-August, there'd be so much natural gas here in the United States, there'd be nowhere else to store it. It would be worth nothing. But what's going on here the past few months is electric generation has really soared with the amount of natural gas usage that's going on. The president is more in favor of this because it does produce 44% less greenhouse gas emissions than coal does. So there is some good, there is a good side to utilizing the natural gas. In our area, we've had a coal plant there for years, and it's not even running right now. They built a couple peak production plants 10 years ago for natural gas, and they're running those all the time now, and not the coal mine. But the generating capacity now is more for natural gas than for coal. Exxon predicts natural gas use will surpass oil by 2030. We may even start exporting natural gas. Crude oil production is expected to grow by 20% in the next decade here in the United States. Shale deposits will continue to grow around the world. There's large deposits in South America. China probably has the largest deposit in the world. You know, why are they investing in some of the companies here in the United States? They know they can't do it here. You know, they're probably in it to make money, but I also assume they're in to learn about the technology too. The Seaway pipeline, we were producing so much oil in the central part of the United States up in North Dakota that they've reversed a major pipeline from Cushing. Cushing is the central hub for oil gathering here in the United States, and that's where the West Texas Intermediate crude price is based at. There had been a spread of about $20 a barrel between our oil prices here in the United States and the bent crude price over in Europe. The biggest reason why is we had such a glut of oil here, we just couldn't get it moved. They've actually reversed a pipeline now from Oklahoma going down to Houston to try to relieve that. Back to our natural gas, it had dropped down to $2, but with that extra natural gas production going on now with power plants, the price has gone up about 25% the past couple months. On Friday, it was up to around $2.50 a thousand from a little less than $2 from not too far, not too long ago. Do you know that U.S. is now a net exporter of fuel? We still import more oil, but we're a net exporter of refined products. So we're taking a lot of products, a lot of oil, refining it, and you know, selling some of the value-added stuff. And there are some people that really get upset about that, and that's partly justifiable. But on the other hand, too, there's value being added. But also keep in mind that a barrel of oil can only produce so much stuff. It can only roughly produce about a third of oil, about a third of gasoline, a third diesel fuel, and a third of the other stuff like grease, motor oil, the heavy sludge that the big ocean liners run on. That's all it can do. In the United States, we tend to produce more diesel than we can use. In Europe, they tend to produce more gasoline than we can use. So it makes sense to balance out the needs, to ship some stuff back and forth, to balance out what our needs are. So some of that makes sense. Imports of oil, this is interesting, people. Imports of oil have dropped from 60% in 2005 to 46% now. We are becoming less dependent. And so much of our imports now come from Canada and Mexico. There's more oil being produced in the United States, plus there's less consumption. Our consumption has dropped. Companies are moving from gas to oil exploration because it's more profitable. They're developing natural gas fuel for gas engines. Honda's now mass producing them in Indiana. Dodge and GM are starting to produce natural gas trucks. Some of them are even having some gasoline or diesel fuel backup. Some recent trends, like I mentioned, The Bakken Shale field in North Dakota has now surpassed Alaska in terms of production. Manufacturing plants in the United States are returning to America because, I should say, of less expensive energy costs. We do have a comparative advantage there. Some communities, like I mentioned, are being disrupted. Infrastructure strains in some communities, like up in North Dakota. For every job created in the energy sector, 4 supported by the energy supply chain. $145 billion to be spent on drilling this year. EPA has passed those new air pollution rules for drilling and fracking. They'll go into effect in the 2 years. I don't expect there to be much effect on that. The companies are expecting it to happen. Again, this is for air pollution. Jobs, there's a lot of jobs being created in Ohio. There's been a new steel mill built in Youngstown. It's been amazing to see what's happened there. People ask me how many local jobs will be used. I can't answer that exactly. These companies will be looking for as many local jobs as they can get. Local employees as they can get, but certainly hauling, trucking, reclamation work, dozer work is going to use many local people. Businesses are going to see a lot more demand coming on if people start getting bonus payments or royalty payments in eastern Ohio. The largest Cadillac dealership in Ohio is now in a small community over in eastern Ohio where this boom has happened at. It's really been amazing. Clif tells me a tractor company over in eastern Ohio has had the best 6 months ever. When we're in West Virginia, a lot of new cars, a lot of new homes were being built. So there had been some spillover to some other industry that really helped them out. There was 413,500 jobs in oil and gas extraction. That was up from 13.6% from the year before, so it's been going up. There is potential. You hear about those that can capitalize on this and those that can't. If someone in there that maybe can't capitalize on it but's a true entrepreneur and really motivated, there is still some potential out there. We've seen people start something like catering services for these companies. They're going to be looking for food. Cleaning services. You see all those trailers. There's been some people capitalizing on that. A lot of business owners that have vacant space have leased it out. If you have rooms or things like that to rent, it can happen. A lot of these communities, it's hard to find anywhere to rent, and that can be an issue. I'll mention that in a minute. There'll be an increase in local government revenues. They're starting to see some more money coming in some of these communities to the local governments. A leasing company paid minerals as much as $60 million in August to Belmont County. Clif will tell you about what happened in Guernsey County, another county, here after a bit. BP bought 84,000 acres of leases in Trumbull County. That's up above Youngstown for $330 million here a couple months ago. And will some of these bonus payments and royalties go to local businesses? Yeah, they are. There's been billions spent for leases in Ohio. In an energy study, this was an energy industry study, they predicted 200,000 new jobs in Ohio by 2015. OSU was saying 20,000 jobs is what they expected. What we're seeing right now is there'll be 20,000 jobs created by the end of this year with what's going on. In Ohio, who's kind of oversees and monitors what goes on with the wells? Ohio has a regulatory authority of our wells. It's the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. Here in Illinois, it's the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. Anybody hear about those earthquakes that happened in Youngstown from the disposal well? That was a disposal well that was drilled specifically for disposal of fluids. And in April last year, they started having tremors. They brought in immediately seismic activity. I think it was from Brown University, and they started monitoring what was going on there. And then the day after Christmas, they had a 4.0 when it was felt. The epicenter of that was 100 meters from the disposal well. What they found out is they drilled right near a fault line. And when they were putting fluid down in, and the other thing is they drilled down into Precambrian era stone. They drilled all the way down in granite. There wasn't porous material. So when they drilled down in there, the fluid got down in the fault line, relieved pressure, caused an earthquake. They shut the well down, they pumped out the fluid, it's done. The other 177 wells they really haven't had issues with. They've put in more seismic monitoring activity there in Ohio to monitor for it. Are there additional earthquakes related to disposal wells in the central United States? I've heard some reports about that. I have not. There hasn't been any more information that I've heard about it. That was brought up here about a month ago. There'll need to be some more investigation. If it is, could it be extraction? Could it have been injection? Those are some things they're going to check into. There's been a lot going on in Ohio. They're averaging about 5 permits a week. There's a lot going on. What was interesting, this is how fast it's moving. Back in December, there was 1 double rig and 3 triple rigs in Ohio. In March, there were 13 double rigs and 18 triple rigs in Ohio. Those are the big rigs. They're moving in here. One county in Ohio, back several months ago, there was only 6,000 acres left to be leased. All the rest of the county had been leased. Now I think it's less than 2,000 acres. Virtually the entire county has been leased. In Ohio, what's interesting, we actually have on the Ohio Department of Natural Resources website actual production of some of these wells. They have to report every, I think, 3 or 6 months what the actual production is on their wells. And Ohio Department of Natural Resources, as this stuff has started making this information available. I looked on the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, and they have some pretty good information there. And I'm sure if this happens, they'll start reporting more information there. There's where you can find the information at here in Illinois. It's dnr.state.il.us/mines/dogs. So you can look at that. That's where I got some of this information at. What are the impacts? Damage to roads, we've talked about that. Water, we've kind of discussed. Jobs, there's about 410 to 420 involved per well. New businesses, job migration, sales taxes going up, pipelines. When we talked with some local officials in Pennsylvania, here's what their concerns. Water and roads, we've kind of discussed, but how about housing? We need to be aware of this, cognizant of it. The 7th fastest growing city in the United States right now is Williamsport, Pennsylvania. All these people coming in, looking for work. And these companies having all these employees, if I have places to rent, and instead of renting out to some needy people for $400 an acre, I can rent out to $2,000 an acre, something like that going to happen. It can, and there's been some issues over there in north central Pennsylvania. They hadn't seen it where we were at in southwestern Pennsylvania, but we need to be cognizant and aware of that. Finally, recent surveys from landowners with leases in Pennsylvania. This is about a year old now, just to let you know. So some numbers could have changed a little bit. But 10 to 12% people that were took the survey indicate they were pressured into signing a lease by neighbors and companies. I would argue in Ohio it's a lot more. Last June we had one person come in, somebody was offering, a little over, about 18 months ago it was $10 an acre. About a year ago he came in and said they're offering $100 an acre. You got to sign by tomorrow or we're out of here. We're gone. We're gone. Well, when nobody signed with him, then he came back 2 days later, said 200 final offer. Well, still only one person signed, and he got mad afterwards. But if you're getting pressured, walk away, okay? Don't sign till you have a good, clear conscience. Don't succumb to high pressure. I've seen people literally sign leases just to get the people off the property, get them out of their hair. Boy, don't do that. Ask them to leave. Take it to an attorney. Make sure you understand what's going on. Take a look here at the second line. A small percentage of people that sign leases are receiving royalties. As of last year, maybe as low as 2%. Now, why is that? Why is that? One, they haven't drilled, have they? And what's interesting is people that signed 4 or 5 years ago were really bitter. They signed for $10 an acre, and the neighbors were signing for $2,000, $3,000 an acre. They were all upset. Well, now the leases are expiring, and they have a chance to negotiate a new lease. But also, they may have drilled a well there, and it's not in production. So, remember when I said when I first started how important that bonus payment is? That bonus payment could be all the money you get. And to be quite frankly with me, if I were to sign a lease, and anybody that's reporting for the papers, don't report this because I don't want anybody to know it, but I would love to sign a lease, get a bonus payment, and then never drill on my property. I mean, wouldn't that be nice? So, but, you need to expect it to happen, though, if you do it. But small percentage of people are receiving royalties, maybe as low as 2%. Keep that in mind. They may come and tell you, you're going to get rich off these royalties. That's what they did to my grandma. They told her she's going to get rich, and she got there, turned red, she got nervous. Eventually she signed. Well, now, 40 years later, I'm having to deal with the mess that was created back then because of situations she didn't understand. And she thought she'd get rich. And a matter of fact, when they did come in and drill a well for a couple of years, she got some pretty good money. But that bonus payment's the only assured money that you'll get. Only assured money you'll get. Think about this one. In that survey, when asked if most people were happy, when asked if people were happy with their lease, most people said no. But when asked if they would sign another lease, Most said yes. So what does that mean, folks? Before you sign a lease, make sure you understand it. Make sure you're comfortable with it. And if you're thinking about leasing, I want you to make sure you listen to what Clif has to say, because he's going to tell you an awful lot, and your head may explode. So just be ready for it. Be ready for it. And finally, without proper financial planning, and we see this happen a lot, your spending will rise to your level of income, and when revenue decreases, you could be worse off. And we've seen this happen in Pennsylvania. Where are you going to put your money? I've got a list up here. I need to add one thing to it. Number one, I don't care what order you do these in except the last one, folks. Keep the last one last. But there should be a one before the rest of these, is you're going to need to keep money back to pay taxes. Depending on how large your bonus payment is, in Ohio, we'll have to pay at least 35.1% in federal taxes, maybe 6-7% in state taxes. I'm not sure how high your state taxes are, but be prepared to keep at least 40% back for taxes if you get up to a high enough number where you're taxed at that top tax bracket. But then, what are you going to do with the money? What two businesses have been hurt the most by this oil and gas boom? One's the coal industry, and it took a while for it to start happening, but coal prices have dropped. For a while, they were able to export a lot more coal, and demand is still up, but the prices have dropped. Demand has dropped. We're exporting a lot more coal now, and that's starting to temper it. But the one business that's really been hurt by this are small community banks. Because if I got a debt and I get this large bonus payment, what's the first thing I'm going to do? I'm going to go into the bank, and we're going to have a mortgage burning party, aren't we? We're going to get rid of that. But after you do that, then what are you going to do? You're going to save, or you're going to invest? You need to think about that and plan. But also think about this. How about philanthropy? Have you ever said to yourself, if I ever get rich, I would like to give back to fill in the blank? Now, I went through Christian school for 6 years. Without doing that, I'd have been in a lot worse trouble, a lot worse shape than I am now. And I'm grateful for that. I hated every day of it. My dad made me do that, but I look back now and see how fortunate and lucky I was because I was a follower and not a leader back then. Maybe your local fire department, maybe your local church, something like that. But think about that. I want you to consider that. And finally, buying toys. Unless you're being taxed at 100%, buying something you don't need is going to cost you money, isn't it? So, okay, with that, Adam, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.